Australia, the sixth largest country on Earth. An ancient, rugged, and unforgiving land with abundant animal life, both beautiful and deadly. Found within its awe-inspiring landscapes and natural beauty exists a deep history of unexplained mysteries for anyone with the courage to investigate them. Tonight, we join Ben on a journey across this vast island continent in search of answers to events that have reshaped the lives of so many that have been exposed to Unexplained Phenomena Australia. With your host, Ben Hurl.
G'day everyone, and welcome to another episode of Unexplained Phenomena Australia. Tonight we've got a really intriguing episode for you. Tonight we're going to be looking at the very interesting case of a man called Ron Hydes, who on the 24th of August 1967 had a truly extraordinary encounter on the Hume Highway, which is the main highway between Sydney and Melbourne, at about 5 o'clock in the afternoon, when he encountered a landed UFO or craft with two occupants outside as he was riding his motorcycle just outside the town of Albury, right on the New South Wales Victorian border. So this case has been absolutely an incredible case, and it's really been lost to time because it occurred so many years ago. And an interview that Ron has done in the year of the encounter has been unearthed. Now, I grew very interested in this case when I was young. At school, I remember reading a little bit about it, just the basic outline of it. And even today, you can go online to various websites and find a basic, outline of what actually occurred to Ron on the 24th of August, 1967. So that was my first experience through school. And it had always been on my list of cases to have a look at and to get involved in again. And one day I was talking to my good friend and fellow researcher, George Simpson, who I had on the show about 2 weeks ago. And as I was talking to George and told him about my interest in the case and what a great encounter it was, George then said to me that he had a tape with an interview that Ron had done in October 1967. Now, this is significant as the recording was done so close in time to the actual events, when it was definitely fresh in Ron's mind. And that comes out very clearly in the interview. The interview had been found on a reel-to-reel tape in the possession of longtime Viewforce member Les Bristol. So tonight, George is going to join me and we will present this to you in full. This is a long-lost interview and has not been heard in over 50 years, not by the public and certainly not by a 21st century audience. And it is very compelling listening. So with that, I would like to welcome George. Hello, George.
Yeah, g'day, Ben. How are you?
I'm very well. Thank you for joining me again on tonight's episode. Well, I'm very excited to be talking about this case, and I was very happy when you mentioned to me that you actually did have a copy of an interview that Ron had done.
Well, I was surprised because the name that you mentioned about the case matched a tape I'd just been listening to because I was playing the reel-to-reel tape and digitizing it so I could put a bit of modern-day magic on it to tidy up the sound and make it sound a bit better so everybody could listen to it. And it's a pretty good recording, and with a bit of tweaking, it's come up pretty well. And I had been just doing that in the last few days before you mentioned the case. So, of course, I said, well, we've got a tape of that. It's an old Viewforce tape. And I was a committee member of Viewforce for 8 years. And this
Yes.
came to me through Les. It's an old reel-to-reel tape, and it's really quite good. Maybe we should just introduce the story. Now, the thing is, I'm not 100% sure. I never met Ray Fisher, but Ray Fisher was one of the early guys in Viewforce, and he owned this reel-to-reel tape recorder, and he went around interviewing a whole lot of people. I'm pretty sure it must have been him, because he would have been with the tape recorder.
Yes.
And it doesn't sound like, it's not Peter Norris's voice on the tape. It's not Peter Norris. I'm pretty sure it's Ray Fisher. He sounds like a typical Australian gentleman of the 1960s. So they had almost a British sounding manner to them when they were very highly educated people.
Yes.
And of course, people that get into UFO research are normally very highly educated people, aren't we? You know,
we are absolutely, George.
Yes. Yeah. We're all fully qualified and everything, of course. You know,
Yeah, most certainly.
Highly intelligent as well. You know, well, you'll hear this guy. He sounds like a Brit. You know, he might have. Or if you listen to the ABC radio in those days in the 60s, all the radio announcers sounded like they were coming from London. You know. They sounded
exactly
like they were
right.
from England. But anyway, so you'll hear him talking on the tape, but you'll hear the motorcyclist, the Ron, talking about what's happened to him. Very Australian, a really good ochre Australian voice.
Yeah,
so
100%.
how about we, rather than talking about it, how about we run a bit of it and we'll have a listen? What do you reckon?
Yeah, sure thing.
Should we do that?
Well, just quickly before that, I'll just give people an orientation just on where this occurred. Just a couple of brief, quick pictures. So this is a map of Victoria, Australia, Melbourne being the capital city down at the centre there. And where that red dropper is the town of Albury Wodonga, which is a two towns that run across the Victorian and the New South Wales border. So that's where in the state and where in Australia this particular incident occurred. So I'll just show you that for now. And I've got a couple of other images that I might be able to bring up as we go along, just that will also show that a little clearer as well.
Okay, fantastic. Good idea.
Yep. So I think we'll just launch straight into it. So George and I are going to play a piece of the tape, then we'll stop it, have a bit of a chat and keep playing, and we'll just see how we go. So here we go. I'll start it now.
Yeah. Good.
On the 16th of October, 1967, regarding the sighting of an unidentified flying object south of the on the 24th of August, 1967. Ron, where exactly did you see this object first?
On the Hume Highway, that's 10 miles south of the New South Wales Victorian border, heading from Wodonga.
What were you doing at the time?
I was riding a motorcycle between Sydney and Melbourne.
You were heading in the direction of Melbourne?
Yeah, that's right, I think that's 70 mile an hour.
70 mile an hour. How far were you from Wodonga at the time of the sighting?
10 miles.
10 miles. What time of the day was this? 5 o'clock. It was light, pretty light at the time?
Oh yeah, the sun was still out. Had been raining earlier. I'd stopped at Albury for about an hour or so till the rain stopped. And that cleared up very well in that area. There was quite a clear blue sky with clouds on the horizons, but none above us.
Was it windy at the time?
No, there was no wind.
Was the sky completely overcast?
No, it was definitely clear above where I was.
Yeah. How did you first notice the object?
Well, as I said, I was doing about 70 mile an hour. And I was suddenly surrounded by a very, very bright bluish white light. It was so intense it was hard to see out of it. It was a sort of a circle of light around me. And would have been, I'm only guessing it was for about 30 feet, I should imagine, in diameter, the light itself. And naturally, I looked up to see where the source was. And it was so intense, the light above me, that I was virtually blinded. And so I had to stop the boating.
Was the light shining on you in a beam, or was the light sort of generally over the countryside surrounding you?
No, it was just over me.
Just right over you?
Yeah, whatever the source of the light was directly above me, shining down and over me.
Did it light up the road there?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it was very bright.
Was the road wet or dry?
No, it was dry.
What did you do then, Ron?
Well, I stopped the bike and took my sunglasses off, which I was wearing at the time. They're only just a cheap pair of plastic ones. They're not Polaroid or anything. And wiped my eyes. And But for some reason, I looked off the road down to my left, and there was a disc-shaped object which first appeared to be on the ground. But after looking at it for a while, I realised it was about 3 or 4 feet above the ground. Would have only been about 100 feet away from me.
When you were driving along before you stopped and you first saw this light, could you see any object?
No, there was just a vague suggestion of something above the light, but it was so bright I only looked at it for a fraction of a second. I couldn't see, you know.
And it was right above you at that time?
Yeah, it was directly above me, but I couldn't say at what height. There's no way of knowing. It was just so intense.
So you stopped the bike, wiped your glasses and had a look, and you saw an object off to the left of you in the paddock, is that so?
That's right. It was slight downhill from the road. It would have been about 3 or 4 feet below the road level where the thing was. And I left the motor of the bike going, stuck it up on the centre stand, that's, you know, the stand that it says you can leave it there. And I was wondering whether or not to go over and have a look at this thing. I stood there for quite a while. When I say quite a while, about a minute or so. Could have been 2 minutes. It's hard to tell. And then the car went past, and I stepped down from the road into sort of a culvert thing where on the side of the field. And I sort of heard the car, and I tried to stop it to point the object out, but he went past. And then when I came back, or when I looked back at the thing, there's 2 figures that appeared on my side of it.
So I'll just pause it there, George. What do you make of that so far?
Well, first of all, I'm very glad that the very beginning was muffled, but it got clearer, didn't it?
It did, yes,
That's
it did.
just how I was thinking, oh no, this sounds terrible, but it got very clear. You could hear it now. So that's just how it was, the original tape. Interesting. I mean, he's describing something that's very large and right above him while he's riding his bike, very, very bright. And he's looked up, and it's so bright now he had to stop riding the bike because it's basically overloaded his eyes. It's blinded him, and he had to. It was not safe to ride a motorbike if you can't see. You're getting off the bike. You're going to come to a stop. So he's done that, and then he's on the side of the road, and then he's seen something that's landed on the ground. What did he say? A couple of 100 yards away or something from him.
Yeah, it's
a car's gone past.
Yards. Yeah, he says 100 feet, and I think that's about 30 meters.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, 30 meters, and it's about 5 o'clock in the afternoon or something like that, wasn't it? So it's a daylight event, and he's riding solo on the motorbike. Oh, he did one thing that's one of my pet hates. He said he put it up on the stand and left the motor running on the motorbike.
Yes.
Well, that was probably so he could make a quick escape. But I hate seeing idling engines, especially diesels. But that's just me. I hate them. You've got to turn those motors off if you're not driving. Turn them off.
Yes.
Anyway,
I think he would have done that.
He's wanting to.
Yeah, I think he would have done that because he
quick escape.
Exactly. Yeah. So he's this thing, you know, and he talks about this very calmly, as we'll see when we continue.
Yeah. How about go a bit further?
I'll press play.
It's good.
The car that went past, do you think he could have seen the object from the road?
It's hard to say, but I doubt it. Unless they were looking in that area, I doubt very much. They may have just seen something, but going past, you know, the road there, no, I'd say he wouldn't have seen it. No.
Whilst you were stopped, how many cars do you think passed you on the highway?
Well, there was only the one that went past that I attempted to stop, which I had no hope I could even get to the road fast enough. And then there may have been others go past after that, but I was too intrigued by the thing to notice.
How far off the road was the object?
Well, wouldn't have been much more than 100 feet.
This was a grassy area, a paddocked area, farm area?
Yeah, it was a paddock that looked as though it had been used for grazing sheep or cattle or something like this. There's no trees, barring the nearest tree would have been about 200 yards away. It was just an open expanse.
Were there any animals in the paddock at the time?
No, there was no animals, no people, no nothing, just me.
Did you see any homestead from the area you were at?
Not from where I was, but further up the road, about another 2 or 3 miles up the road, there was a homestead on the left, but well off the road.
I see. Well, what did you do after you got off the bike? You were standing watching the object and you saw 2 figures?
Yeah, I didn't see them come out of the object. It was quite obvious they belonged to it. And we just sort of stood there and looked at each other for a while. I presume they were looking at me. They were facing in my direction. And then I took a step towards them to see what sort of reaction it would get. And the two figures did exactly the same thing.
That's incredible, isn't it?
Yes. I guess he would have been fairly surprised to see two. He says figures. He's talking about, basically what humanoid-looking creatures, not animals, but little people that resembled humans, I guess. Yeah.
And he's talking
So
them
what
about
would you do?
Well, I would be doing exactly what he is doing, and I would still be standing there. And he's sort of in this little Mexican standoff sort of a situation at the moment where he's standing there. They've seen him. He didn't see them appear, but then next minute there they are, two of them, 5 foot tall, clad in an entirely, a skin tight uniform with a fishbowl type of helmet.
He's taken a step to see how they'll react. He might have been hoping they would step back, but they stepped forward. He stepped forward. They stepped forward. Wow.
Wow. Let's keep listening.
Well, you'd have to be pretty sure of yourself to do that, I guess. Yeah.
I think you're right.
And we stood there for a while longer. And I was wondering whether to turn tail and run or go across and see what it was doing. And one of the figures took 2 steps towards me quite slowly and raised his hand and beckoned me over to him. Well, at this stage, I panicked and dived back on the bike and took off down the road.
Could you see any opening in the craft, any door or passage or ladder of any sort?
No, there was nothing showing whatsoever.
And how far do you think the object was off the ground?
About 3 or 4 feet.
Did it stay at a constant height all the time that you watched it?
Yes, it didn't move, it didn't hum, it didn't make any noise, it didn't do anything. It just sort of hovered above the ground. It's uncanny.
Getting back to these figures, were they? What sort of figures were they? If you could describe them as completely as you can remember them.
Well, they were about 5 to 5.5 feet tall. I couldn't say for sure unless I was a bit closer to them. I'd say between 5 and 5.5 feet tall. Completely covered from neck to feet in a sort of a silver coverall. But it was a very, very tight fitting thing. There's no seams, no creases. It almost looked like skin, including the hands and the feet were covered in this. Well, it's just looked as though somebody sprayed them with silver paint, more or less,
Did this material reflect like a silver sheet, or did it look like a silver cloth?
Silver cloth. It didn't appear to be reflective. It was similar to an unbuffed chrome in appearance. It didn't appear to be unbuffed chrome, but the actual texture of it, the colour of it, was like unbuffed chrome. It had no reflective quality,
Could you see any joints in the material at all?
No, there was nothing whatsoever.
How about the being's feet?
No, they just had this coverall appear to extend over their feet the whole lot.
Well, you couldn't see any shoes.
Well, there may have been a sole on this. It just looked as though the thing had a zipper up the back, which I couldn't see, and they stepped into it, and it's had shoes, gloves, the whole lot, all in one.
How are they built? Heavy, slight?
Well, I'd say what we call a medium build. There didn't appear to be any excess fat on them. I just presume they've got fat. But it didn't appear, just put it this way, if I was 5'5", this is the way I'd like to be built.
I see. The hands of these beings, could you see at that distance separate fingers, or was it completely covered in the silver material?
No, this I took notice of because I had seen them move, both arms, legs and hands, and they are exactly the same as we are, in joints, in the distance between joints. I can't say about the head because it was covered by a helmet of some description, and it may have had a transparent area in the front of it, but the rest of the helmet was an opaque finish.
Just pause it there. Very detailed description.
Yeah. Well, he was when you're riding a motorcycle, it's like you're going to war with the rest of the road users. You have to be alert. You have to be well awake and alert, and very, very observant about everything, because your survival depends on it. And so he's pulled over the bike and he's looking at everything, and he's just observing he's recalling what he saw, Interesting that about the helmet and the tight fitting, almost like it looked like it was sprayed onto them. Kind of, that's a tight suit, Interesting stuff.
Yeah, it is, and it's quite a common reported type of suit too throughout UFO history. Like particularly during that 50s and 60s, 70s type of period, there's lots of silver suits and helmeted occupants appearing in different crafts, and always with that skin tight, almost like a second skin type of appearance.
Well, what occurred to me just in that little segment too was it didn't say there were any legs going down to the ground from the object. It was just hovering there. You know, that movie, The Flight of the Navigator, that object just hovers. There's no legs to the ground. It's just there. And, the steps come down, but there's nothing supporting them either. That was Hollywood, but it was well done. But he's describing something that's so far different to anything we know. We would have a leg with a wheel on the end of it. This thing hasn't got anything. It's just sitting there, not making any sound, and it's rock solid, just sitting there. Very interesting.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
I'll keep playing.
Yeah.
And I couldn't see into it.
Could you describe the helmet more thoroughly, the design of same, and sort of what size it was in relation to a normal head?
About half as large again, perhaps. Yeah, about half as large again, just like a fish bowl turned upside down. It's completely round.
So it came round at the base of their necks, not to their shoulders.
No. The coverall thing went to neck, and this helmet seemed to fit down over the thing, which appeared fantastic because quite obviously they couldn't drag the thing off. It wouldn't fit over their chins. That's saying that surmising they've got the same sort of features as what we have. And even between the helmet and the coverall, I couldn't see any joint. I presume there must have been, but I couldn't see any.
This helmet was the same colour as the garments that they were wearing?
No, it wasn't. It was a greyish. It was more of a grey colour. Same sort of texture, but more of a greyish colour.
Metallic?
It's hard to say. I couldn't say. It could have been metallic. It could have been some sort of a plastic substance. How they look the same. But it seemed strange to me that I couldn't see into the helmet being so close to it. You'd think that if there had been a transparent part at the front that I would have noticed this.
Was the helmet the same colour all over, or was there any difference in the shade of the helmet, for instance, in front of where you'd think their eyes would be?
No, it appeared to be the same all over.
There was no faceplate or anything like that?
None that I could see, but thinking about the helmet, it would have been possible for a transparent part to be in the front of it without me seeing it from the angle we were.
What I find so interesting about the way he describes the helmet, it's almost like this suit is kind of like a what's the right word? It's like it's almost part of the body almost. Like the helmet. He couldn't sort of just get around how the helmet and the neck were attached to each other. Like it's a really extraordinary description for what I would call a uniform, and not what you would encounter in our world.
It's reminding me, just listening to it, it's reminding me a bit of the astronauts when they were on the moon. They had, the suits went up to their neck, but they had a large ring around that when they had a big helmet on top. And the lighting was such that when they were on the moon, you couldn't see their faces inside it. When they took those photographs, all you got was a reflection of what was in the environment. You know, so it could be a similar effect like that, perhaps. It's like he's not seeing some strange-looking person looking at him, is he? He's just seeing the arms and legs of the body and this round helmet. And the arm gesture was beckoning him to come over, and he's thinking, maybe not. Yes, but it's very good. It's a very clear description, and this is one of the things I like about these eyewitness cases. You know, the skeptics will always say people are really bad at describing things or remembering things. Memories are really terrible. This guy's memorizing very clearly what he's seeing and giving a very clear description, and he's thought about what it was, and he's tried to figure it out. He's an intelligent guy, you know. He's not. and you've got to give this guy some credit. You know, he's giving very clear descriptions of something he has never encountered before. And he says it looks like it could be a plastic, it could be a metallic thing or a ceramic. He's not sure. It's got certain properties that he can describe, but he can't say for sure what they are. So he's very intelligent.
Yeah, he is. He is, and that's one of the things that I really love about this encounter is just how he's kind of almost detached from it, because he's not extremely emotional about it. He talks about it in an extremely rational way, and I think that for such a high strangeness encounter, his description of it is extraordinary, and I don't think I've really heard something like it myself. There might be other examples out there, but his description is very thorough.
Yeah, he's pretty good. Yeah.
What
does he say
playing.
next, Ben? What's he say next?
Let's keep on. Let's not dilly dally.
Was behind me showing on them. I think it would have been possible to have just a clear piece of glass in the front. I still wouldn't have seen it.
So the helmets were really reflecting more than the garments that they were wearing?
Not reflecting so much. They seemed to more absorb light than reflect light. But they had a... it's very hard to explain it. Not a reflective quality, but they seem to, well, as I said, to hold light, but not reflect it away from them like a mirror or high polished metal does. So, I mean, the craft was of a high polished metal, and it quite obviously reflected light. But the suits didn't, even though they were brighter than what they would have been in a dark room. You know, you wouldn't have seen them in a dark room. They still seem to somehow sort of hold the light. We'll put it this way: I've never seen anything like it before. This is sort of absorbing light quality, so I can't compare it with anything I know. It's very hard to find words because there isn't any.
Right. Did you ever see these figures from the rear?
No, only front views.
Wow, it's interesting, isn't it? Just that description is
very clear description.
Yeah, I mean, the way he talks is that you can actually see what he's saying.
Yeah, and he's saying that this helmet is absorbing light rather than reflecting. That's interesting. I don't know if we've got anything that's quite like that.
No, and I haven't heard that before about a suited occupant being described in that way, that it's absorbing light, not shiny or reflecting it. Because you often hear that about craft themselves, where they lit up like a billboard, but they don't cast shadow. So there's some interesting, quality to these, materials that they're being used. This is 1967.
Yeah, some kind of dynamic going on there that we don't know about.
No.
So this is just one year after in the next year after Westall happened.
Yes, exactly. That's a really good point. Yeah, just straight after. Yeah, within the next 12 months from Westall, this is a major, close encounter with occupants on the ground. So, people.
It's pretty close.
Yeah, and really close. Yeah, like exactly, extraordinarily close to him. Amazing.
Yeah.
I'll press play.
From the side, just the front view.
No, only from the front. I'm only surmising that they were the same as we are. I didn't see them from the side, but if they had been 15 feet thick or something, it would have showed up.
What distance were they from you again?
Well, by taking the distance I was from the bike and what they were from the craft, I'd say no more than 80 feet, perhaps even 70 feet.
Did they at any time speak or shout to you or emit any audible sound?
No, at this stage I hadn't heard a sound either from the craft or from the two figures.
How did you feel at this stage, Ron?
Well, for some reason, and it's not in character with myself, I was extremely frightened, thinking about it, or unreasonably frightened. I mean, it's understandable that I would have been a little bit apprehensive or something, but not to the point of, well, virtually sheer terror, which I felt when this person beckoned me over to them. And thinking about it later, I wasn't aware of it at the time, but thinking about it later, it seemed to me that there was the craft or the people or something in the area was sort of sending put it this way, like a radio wave, which I couldn't feel with my senses or touch or smell or something, but it seemed to be radiating this fear. I don't know, this may have been a reason for the contact, to see what sort of a reaction this would bring about, you know. But
this, we might call it a panic reaction or fear reaction. Did this start immediately? You stopped the bike before you stopped the bike afterwards? How did it sort of begin, and how did it build up?
no, I'm quite definite on this. Before the figures appeared, I'd virtually made up my mind. If they hadn't have appeared, I would have gone over to the object and had a look at it. And it wasn't until after I looked away from the object, then looked back and saw the figures, that this fear impulse.
Okay, that's the end of part one. So yeah,
Okay.
really incredible stuff.
So this fear he's talking about, this fear impulse, you know what that reminds me of? Remember when Chase Kalesi came out here and she was talking about they went out into that field where the things had been seen flying around, and they thought there might have been somebody hiding in the bushes, but there was this sort of they noticed this really, like something was generating a feeling that they all picked up on, and it was fear, and it was like it was put upon them so that they took off out of there.
Exactly.
That's a handy gadget to have.
Yeah, that's a good analogy. That's a really good comparison, and I think that he's, you know, like, we all say that we'd love to stand there and you know, go up and meet the aliens, but it's not necessarily going to happen that way.
Yeah. Or if it has, they may generate as a safety mechanism something to make you turn tail and run, make you frightened. And
it's
could
almost
be like a vibe machine, a fear machine, a vibe. You feel fear, you go, you get out of there.
Absolutely.
Could be.
And it's almost like there's this, it's almost like it's an experiment between him and them as well. Like there's this sort of like, he takes a step, they take a step, arm gets raised up, beckoning, and it's this really sort of interaction that occurs.
Yeah.
So I'll start. That's all right.
Yeah, let's have a listen to the next bit. What's he going to say now?
Well, let's have a listen.
Yeah, what's he going to say?
So let's go back just a little minute. I apparently haven't got this quite straight. When you first saw the object on the ground, there were no figures?
No, there were no figures when I first saw it. And as I said before, I looked away. I was going to try and wave the car down, but I went past too fast and I couldn't get up on the road quick enough. I doubt if he would have stopped anyway, being a motorcyclist and all the rest. But it wasn't until I looked back to the craft the second time that the figures were there. I didn't see them get out of the craft. I'm only surmising they belonged to it. We say quite obviously just by their dress. But I didn't see them leave the craft. I just looked back and there they were standing in front of the thing facing me.
How far away from the craft were they when you first saw them?
About 10 feet in front of it.
And this fear reaction started at that stage?
Well, it's hard to say exactly when it started, but I became aware of it after I'd taken the step. I didn't become aware of it then, but thinking back on it now, I realised when it first hit me, it was after I'd taken the step towards the figures and they'd done the same, and they'd copied the action.
You took the initiative first. You were the first one to move.
Yeah, well, at this stage, I was just purely curious. When I first saw the thing, I mean, I'd heard a little bit about flying saucers, but hadn't taken any interest in them. And my immediate reaction when I first saw it was, well, there's a flying saucer. Now we know they exist, and I wonder what it's doing there, and will I go over and have a look at it? But it was just purely curiosity. As I said, if this fear reaction hadn't set in after these figures appeared, I would have definitely gone over to the saucer or the disc, whatever you want to call it, and had a look at it.
Have you ever felt this sort of fear or panic before in any other situation?
No, never. No. Well, just for instance, I've been racing bikes for a few years, and if you're going to feel fear or panic, you'll feel it in the racetrack.
This was an unreasonable fear. You couldn't fight against it.
No, it was completely out of character. It was just like an animal instinct. All I wanted to do was hop on the bike and run away. You know, it was just.
So isn't that interesting? That's that exact reaction, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, also he said something else there that was quite interesting. He said he races motorbikes. So he's he knows what he's doing with his bike. He knows how to ride. He's a very, very proficient motorcyclist. He races motorcycles. Well, if you're racing a motorbike, you are so alert when you're going even faster. You're looking at everything around you at very rapid speed. You have to survive. And this thing isn't moving or doing anything, and he's just standing there. He's taken one step, and all of a sudden he's got this great feeling of fear that's overcome him, and he just wants to jump on the bike and get out of there. It's just very interesting. And the only other UFO encounter I've heard of where anybody has said that this fear ran through the people was that one I mentioned before when Chase said that happened to them.
Yep.
Really, really very interesting. A lot of these things don't get into the reports, do they?
They don't. No, that's the stuff you're not going to read online when you go to a web page for a snapshot of this particular case. You're not going to get that. This is what the interviews will give you.
Yeah. Get away. Yeah. It was I was more or less possessed by it. It was completely unreasonable.
Let's go back again to the what we were talking about a moment ago. You took a step towards the figures and the object. What did they do?
Yeah, we faced each other for a minute or so, and I was still curious at this stage, and I took a step towards them to see what they do. And then they took the same step towards me. After I'd taken the step, they both took a step towards me, and then we just stood as sort of a stalemate again for a while. And then after being in this position for a while, I suppose a minute or so, it could have just been 5 seconds, it's hard to say. But then one of the other figures took a couple of steps towards me and beckoned me over. And it was at this stage that just absolute sheer panic hit me.
That's when the sheer panic hit him.
I wonder if that's that could either be explained by being a psychological reaction that suddenly came to him that I could be in danger here, or it could be that they've got some kind of method of making you keep your distance by making you have this fear, or maybe it is just a natural fear reaction. Maybe hard to say, really. Exactly. Look, I'm not a qualified psychologist. I studied psychology, but I dropped out of uni. I didn't finish my course, but so I can't really say definitely. Was this a psychological reaction? I think if I was there, it would be a psychological reaction. I'd be getting out of there, wouldn't you?
Yeah, absolutely. And listening to
I would be hanging around.
No, exactly right. And listening to Ron, he doesn't seem like a sort of guy who scares easily either. So listening to the way that he talks, he doesn't strike me as he's a motorcycle racer. He worked in the hotel industry at the time, and he doesn't strike me as someone who would be easily scared.
Well, if he's racing motorcycles, he's either insane or very, very, very good nerves.
Very good nerves.
not a nervous type.
Exactly. Let's continue.
Yeah. Racing motorbike. Yeah.
Could you describe thoroughly exactly what the object looked like at this stage?
Yes, it was. To use a description which has been used before, it's the same as one saucer plonked on top of the other. It had a dome affair on the top of it, which would have, the object would have been about 25, 30 feet across. This is at its widest point. The dome on the top, or cabin, whichever you like to call it by, we'll call it the cabin. It would have been about, the base of it would have been about a third the width of the object. It would have been about 7 or 8 feet high, I think. And then on the top of this cabin, there was a flat spot about 18 inches, 2 feet across. It sort of tapered up from the main hull of the thing. And then on this flat section on the top, there was sort of a little bubble about a foot across, I suppose, and about a foot high or something.
Was this raised portion on the disc the same colour as the disc itself?
No, it wasn't. The top of the disc was a very, very bright polished metal, the same as chromium. Now, the bottom of the disc was, the top and the bottom were divided by what appeared, if you could imagine a metal band about 4 or 6 inches wide, which quite a dark grey. This appeared to go right around the object, and it was well, if to the ground it was vertical. If you follow me, if you understand the description.
So it had a flat edge virtually.
Yeah, it had a flat edge. Now the base of the thing was either a brown or a black, a very dark brown or a very dark grey or black. And protruding from the bottom of the thing there was well, it was the same diameter as the cabin, directly below the cabin, and it was about 18 inches, 2 feet from the hull at the bottom.
Do you think the bottom of the object was brown or reflecting the ground?
No, it was definitely the colour of the thing because it was grass around there.
It was green grass.
Yeah, the bottom didn't appear to have any reflective quality at all. Yeah, this thing protruding from the bottom of it, it was a very, very dark and definite black that stood out from the rest of the thing. Now the cabin of the thing, it was also silver. If you could imagine, the top section of the saucer from the widest point was chrome, and they'd only buffed the actual hull itself and not buffed the cabin. This is the appearance of it.
The little bubble on the top of the dome, was this the same colour as the dome?
Yeah, it was.
And none of the object appeared to be transparent too?
No, there was no transparency whatsoever. And on the hull itself, this is on the brightly polished part of the hull on the right-hand side, there was the start of, well, I'd say it would be some sort of an insignia that appeared to be painted into the hull, but I could only see the beginning of it because of the curvature of the hull. I couldn't make out what it was, or I couldn't reproduce it.
Did the object remain completely steady during the time that you watched it, or did it oscillate slightly?
No, it just stayed there. There's no
rock
movement.
steady.
There's no movement whatsoever and no noise. Anyway, after I took off on the bike, all I could think of was to get away from the thing. And then when I went away from it, all the panic seemed to subside, and I started thinking rationally again. And at this stage, I was doing well over 100 mile an hour. My bike's capable of just on 130 mile an hour, and it was doing this at this stage. Now, I heard a hum, which I hadn't heard from the thing before. And considering I was doing well over 100 mile an hour with a crash hat, engine noise, exhaust noise, plus the wind going through my crash hat to 130 mile an hour, 120 mile an hour, whatever I was doing at the time, it must have been quite loud for me to hear it. So I straight away knew what it was. Don't ask me how I knew. I just knew what it was because I'd never heard a hum like this before, and I had a quick look around. And sure enough, it was airborne now. It was about 200 feet away from me, to my left, and about 100 feet off the ground, and it was following me. When I say following me, as I go around a corner, it had come around with me. It was keeping the same distance from me regardless of how fast or how slow I went. And as I followed the road, at this stage it was a pinkish colour. The whole craft seemed to be surrounded by some sort of a pinkish film. Although I could see it clearly, it had a pinkish appearance about it, as though the air was hot around it or something like this.
Was the air around the object pinkish too, or just the object?
Well, at first I thought it was the object, but after looking at it for a while, I think it was actually away from the object. It could have just been the air that surrounded the object itself, which had this colour to it.
Was it raining at this stage of the sighting, or was it still clear?
No, the sun was still out. It was reflecting off the object.
So you could see this pink glow around the object, and also the sun reflecting from it off of the top?
Yeah, off the top part of it.
How far away from you was the object at this stage whilst it was in flight?
It kept the exact same distance all the time, I'd say. Well, I'm a reasonable good judge of distance. I've had no training, but, I'm a reasonably good judge from racing bikes mainly, from braking for corners and things. And I'd say that would have kept a constant 200 feet from me in a straight line and about 100 feet off the ground, but this varied because of the terrain.
Was this flat terrain there or hilly?
It's reasonably flat, but you get the usual ups and downs that you would in any country area.
Did the object at this stage have exactly the same look as it did when it was on the ground?
Barring the colour, yes.
Yeah, the lower portion was still protruding from the bottom of the disc.
Yeah, the base was still there and it was still jet black. Anyway, I realised that the thing was quite obviously following me, and that I was going as fast as it was possible for me to go, and I couldn't get away from it. So I started slowing down, looking for somewhere to go, like a tree to hide under, or a rabbit burrow to dive into, or a house or something. Anyway, I eventually stopped, and the object stopped with me, still keeping the same distance away from him. I'd more or less resigned myself to the fact that it was after me, and there's nothing I could do to get away from it. And so I just sort of sat on the bike with the motor still ticking over, stopped with my arms folded, and watched it to see what it was going to do. You see, I expected it to come back, of course. But instead of coming back, it sort of sat there for about 30 seconds or so with nothing happening, and then it began to change colour. It was a gradual change from a pink, and it got to a very, very bright and deep red. It finished up. It went right through the whole red spectrum until it was quite hard to look at. It's like it hurt the eyes to look at this. It was so bright. And then it tilted its base. Actually, it tilted the top of the disc away from me at about a 45-degree angle so I could see the base. And the funny part was, although this thing was so bright, the black area in the bottom of it remained black all the time. It stood out very distinctly, you know. And then all of a sudden, without any noise whatsoever, I could still hear the hum at this stage. But when it stopped, it appeared to just about go away. Because as we slowed down together, and the hum seemed to remain constant even though I was slowing down. And so I presume that the faster the thing's going, the louder it hums. This is only surmising this, of course. But it tilted the base away from me after it had reached this very bright red. And all of a sudden it accelerated at an absolutely fantastic rate. Or it left at a fantastic speed. It didn't accelerate. It was 1 minute it was stopped, and the next minute it was doing something like 2,000 or 3,000 miles an hour away from me and up at about a 45-degree angle. And there was still no noise whatsoever. The hum stopped as soon as the thing started moving. And it just went, but there was no acceleration like you'd expect with a plane or something. It starts from naught and it slowly accelerates up to its top speed. Just 1 minute this thing was stopped, the next thing it was doing 2,000 or 3,000 miles an hour. This is only a guess because I'm no expert on airspeed, far from it. But it was going way faster than planes I've seen which have broken the sound barrier. And there was still no noise, there was no sonic boom, there was no nothing. It just vanished. If it had have gone a fraction faster, I would have just thought it disappeared. I could make out that it went up, but only just. It happened so fast.
At this stage, just before it left you, was the bottom still a brownish colour as it was on the ground?
No, the whole thing was bright red, barring the section in the back, like the part at the bottom itself. This is the thing that was protruding from the bottom of it. This was still black. The rest of the thing was a very, very bright red.
Casting your mind back to when you were driving along prior to stopping near the object, was there any noise at that stage associated with it?
None that I can remember. There could have possibly been at the time, but with a bright light, I wasn't really thinking about noise, to be quite honest.
And later, when the object was in flight, did it ever exhibit the same characteristic as earlier in the sighting and shine a bright light anywhere around?
No, there was, barring the light coming from the object, which was, as I said, a reddish colour, there was no other light whatsoever, nothing like what hit me.
Whilst you were travelling along the road, after you left the object, did you pass any cars, or did any cars pass you going in the opposite direction?
Yeah, a couple of cars came the other way, and I waved like mad and pointed towards the thing. This is after the object's reappeared. Before it reappeared, I wasn't worrying about stopping anybody, but when it reappeared, I waved like mad and did all sorts of things, and I got some funny looks, and that's about all I got. Nobody stopped, and nobody appeared to see the object.
What do you think the total time duration of the sighting was from the first moment that you saw it until it finally left?
This is hard to say, but I'd say roughly about 5 minutes. It could have been 3 minutes and it could have been 10 minutes. But, I wasn't looking at any watches.
Have you reported this to the Air Force or any investigative bodies such as the local police?
No, I didn't report it to anybody. I was frightened of ridicule, to be quite honest. I just thought people would laugh at me. It was only through a very roundabout means that I reported it to Pete Norris.
When you first stopped and observed the object closely, wouldn't it have been a more normal reaction to think that this was some sort of Air Force secret weapon and these were Air Forcemen dressed up in a type of spacesuit?
Sorry, but the Air Force has got nothing that looks like that or did what that thing did. Let's face it, it made no noise. It was hovering off the ground. And I've never seen anything shaped like that before. No, it didn't come from here.
You were positive of this when you first saw the object?
Well, as soon as I saw it, I said, well, there's a flying saucer, now you know they exist. So I'd sort of been a bit sceptical before and hadn't taken any notice of them, but after seeing this thing, they exist all right.
Had you ever read anything previous to the sighting on flying saucers or UFOs?
Barring a couple of newspaper headlines in Sydney when they had the saucer nest things, I think it was somewhere around Liverpool. No, I haven't taken any interest in them. I've just I haven't laughed at them, but I haven't taken any active interest in them whatsoever. Read no books or anything prior to this. And
I know we sort of let that play for a fair while, but but
That's
we will
good,
get this all in. Yeah, we will get all this into one episode. So I'm interested in your
That's
thoughts,
good.
George.
Well, first of all, I like the way he described. Sorry, I've just moved a bit. I like how he described that at first when it was flying around near him, it was a sort of the air around the object went kind of a pink colour. That's pretty interesting. I think that there have been a few cases. Excuse me, that sounds to me like the air was ionized or something like that. It could very well be affected by a very highly charged electronic or electric field around the object. That would describe a change in colour. And there are other people that have said things like that, like at the Westall case when Paul Smith said that the thing he saw changed its colour. It went through different colours, and it was like its intensity or its density changed, he thought, because it went through trees without affecting the trees at all. But it could change its density. Now, it's interesting. He says that he heard this humming noise while he was riding the bike, but he turned around. He's going over 100 miles an hour.
Yeah,
he's
very
turned
far
to look at the thing. That's a bit risky. He must have been a very experienced motorcycle racing rider to be able to turn at 100 miles an hour and not come off.
Yes,
I'm
exactly.
glad he didn't come off,
No,
but
exactly.
he's seen this. Yeah, he said it's got an intense red color, the whole object, except for this black ring at the bottom of it. Now that for a physicist, that could be very interesting information for any scientists listening to the show, any physicists with an interest in the subject. They won't be talking to their friends about it. But
no,
they may have an interest in this kind of eyewitness description can give us a lot of clues, I reckon, a lot of clues about the physical reality of these things and what might be actually,
absolutely.
because
and now
it's a very good report of what happened.
It is. And here is Ron's actual drawing. This has not been seen, if at all, in many years. So this is that's his actual picture of what he saw, and you can see that monogram that he said was just out of sight for him, and that all that all very much matches up to what he actually said. And when it was over him, when it was flying above him, this is what he saw looking up at it
from below.
Yeah, from below. So that's
that other side of that other sketch, that first one there. You can see it's got that band around the middle, and it's a saucer on top of the other saucer, and the black thing is the thing at the bottom, the same size as the kind of dome bit on top. Hey, that's really very, very interesting, and it's very similar to the thing described by the Westall witnesses.
Yes,
I haven't seen this sketch before.
No,
this is a really good sketch.
It's an amazing illustration.
It's a great sketch.
And this is his signature when he signed off on his pro forma that he'd done for View Force. That's his signature. So really amazing. And this I've worked this out to be the approximate location of where it occurred, 10 miles outside of Albury. As you know, as near as I can find it, this is the area where he had the encounter, just so people get a bit of an idea on what that area of the highway actually looks like.
Well, like you said, it was pretty flat, but just the usual ups and downs that you get as you go across the country.
Yeah, exactly.
Very clear. So again, a very good description of the area. Yeah,
really fantastic. So thank you very much, George, for joining me on this episode, and I hope that everybody's found it really intriguing, as much as you and I have.
It's a very good case. Very, very good case, and a very good description. And it's been fun doing it, Ben. It's been good. Yeah,
thank you so much, and we'll get together again at some point and perhaps discuss another case down the track. So it's really good.
Yep.
And listen, everybody, we really do hope that you enjoyed that show. Fascinating case. By all means, try and find some more information on it. But this really is probably the most detailed that you'll ever find on that on this particular very intriguing case here on Unexplained Phenomena Australia. So until next week, thank you so much for joining us.